There is a specific moment. You might not remember exactly when it happened. Maybe it was at a family dinner. Maybe it was a phone call out of nowhere. Maybe it was a text message that arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, completely casual, completely devastating in the most unexpected way. Hey, can you help me out with something? That is the moment. Not when you opened a brokerage account. Not when you got a raise. Not when you stopped looking at the price of things before putting them in your cart. The moment it becomes real, the moment your financial life actually changes, is not internal. It is external. And it arrives as a request today. We are going to talk about something that almost no financial content ever touches. What happens to your life, your real life, your relationships, your psychology, the first time the people you grew up with decide you are rich, even if you are not. Because what comes next is not what you expected. And the math of it will surprise you. You grew up in a household where money was, at best, a subject that made adults go quiet. At worst, it was the thing that started the arguments you heard through the walls. Nobody talked about savings rates or asset allocation. The financial conversation in your house was mostly, do we have enough this month? Then, at some point, something changed for you. Maybe slowly. Maybe suddenly. You got a decent job. You moved somewhere cheaper than you grew up. You read something, or someone told you something, and you started making different decisions. You automated a transfer. You stayed in on weekends you used to go out. You stopped buying things to feel better and started buying assets to feel safer. And gradually, quietly, across years of unglamorous discipline, a gap opened up. Not a gap between you and billionaires. Not a gap that would interest anyone on financial news. A much smaller, much more personal gap. The gap between where you are now and where you started. Between what you have and what the people you love have. That gap is the subject of this video. Because that gap creates something nobody prepared you for. It creates a new social role. And that role comes with costs that do not show up in any spreadsheet. Here is how it works, step by step. It starts with visibility. At some point, something gives you away. Maybe you mention a trip. Maybe you show up to an event in a car they have not seen before. Maybe you buy something. Nothing crazy. Just something you wanted, and someone notices. Or maybe you simply stop complaining about money, and the silence itself becomes a signal. Now you are different. You are not just you anymore. You are you, but the version of you that has money. In their mental model, you have been reclassified. Research from the American Psychological Association consistently finds that financial stress is one of the leading sources of conflict in families. But here is the part they do not always mention. The stress flows in both directions. Upward from people who have less, and downward from people who suddenly have more. Once you have been reclassified, a set of informal rules begins to operate. These are not written down anywhere. No one will ever say them out loud. But they are as real as any contract. Rule 1. You cover more. Dinners out. You pay. Events that have a cost, you subsidize. Nobody decided this explicitly. It just becomes assumed. And if you do not comply, something shifts. A tension, a disappointment, a look. Rule 2. You become the safety net. When something goes wrong for someone in your circle, a lost job, a medical bill, a car that died, a landlord who raised the rent, you are now the person they think of first. Again, not because anyone said so. Just because you got reclassified. Rule 3. Your choices get narrated differently. The same decision looks completely different depending on who is making it. When you were broke, moving to a new city was brave. Now it is you running away. When you were broke, driving an older car was frugal. Now, if you drive a newer one, it means you have money to burn. The story around your actions stops being authored by you. This is the system. It runs quietly, automatically, and it will drain you if you do not understand it. Now let us look at the numbers, because the numbers are where this gets genuinely alarming. According to Federal Reserve data, the median American household has less than $40,000 in savings. Roughly a third of Americans have essentially zero in retirement accounts. So if you have managed to accumulate, say, $100,000 in invested assets, which by most definitions makes you part of the upper third of American households by wealth, you are not rich. You are, statistically, doing well. But to someone with zero, you might as well be a hedge fund. Now apply what economists call the wealth perception gap. Studies show that people consistently overestimate the wealth of others who are doing better than them, while underestimating the fragility of that position. Your family does not see your net worth. They do not see your student loans, your credit card balances you cleared, your emergency fund you spent years building. They see the surface. And the surface looks like abundance. A 2021 study published in the Journal of Economic Psychology found that financial assistance given to family members accounts for a statistically significant reduction in the giver's long-term wealth accumulation, not because the amounts are always large, but because of frequency, inconsistency, and the psychological difficulty of saying no to people you love. The math of this is brutal when you actually run it. Say you help out with $500. 4 times a year, $2,000 annually. Not a lot, right? Over 20 years, at a 7% average market return, which is roughly the historical average of a broadly diversified index fund, that $2,000 a year becomes over $86,000 in foregone wealth. That is the cost of being the family bank, not in dollars given, in dollars that never grew. Nobody ever frames it that way. But the market does not make exceptions for family loyalty. Now, there is a version of this story you have probably heard before. It goes like this. You made it. You broke the cycle. You have an obligation to bring people with you. And if you are not doing that, then your success is hollow and you should feel bad about it. That story is doing a specific kind of work. It is designed to make your financial discipline feel like selfishness, and someone else's financial crisis feel like your responsibility. But here is the reality that version leaves out. You are probably not as rich as they think. Most people who get reclassified as rich by their families are still deeply middle class by objective measures. They have a positive net worth, maybe some investments, maybe a house with equity. But they are also one serious medical event away from crisis, one job loss away from real trouble. The buffer looks large from outside. From inside, it does not always feel that way. And the irony, and this is genuinely painful, is that the more you give, the harder it becomes to build the kind of wealth that could actually help over the long term. The family bank is self-depleting. Every withdrawal reduces the capacity for future withdrawals. You become less able to help precisely because you are constantly helping. There is also a documented phenomenon sometimes called sudden wealth syndrome, though it more commonly applies to lottery winners than to people who simply built savings, where the social pressures around new wealth cause severe anxiety, strained relationships, and paradoxically, financial regression. The person with money ends up worse off, emotionally and financially, than if they had never accumulated it at all. The hype says, share the wealth. The reality says, sharing without boundaries destroys the wealth. And often the relationships too. This pattern, the first-generation wealth builder becoming the informal social safety net for their entire network, is one of the least discussed structural reasons why intergenerational wealth is so difficult to build in families that are starting from nothing. Old money knows this intuitively. Wealthy families with financial infrastructure, trusts, advisors, clear inheritance structures have a way of protecting accumulated capital from the informal demands of family dynamics. They are not more heartless. They are simply more systematized. The money is walled off in a way that makes emotional decision-making structurally harder. First-generation builders have none of that. Their money is accessible. Their family knows them personally. The ask is direct. The guilt is real. And the social cost of saying no is immediate and visible in a way that the cost of saying yes, $86,000 in foregone compound growth, never is. This is not a personal failing. It is a structural one. The system of informal family finance extracts capital from the people who are least equipped to lose it at the exact moment when they are trying to build something durable. And it is almost entirely invisible. because nobody talks about it. So where does that leave you? This video is not going to tell you to stop helping your family. That is not a financial decision, it is a human one, and it belongs to you. But it is going to ask you to make it consciously, to see it for what it is, to understand that every dollar that flows out of your hands informally is a dollar that does not compound, and to recognize that the moment your family reclassifies you, the moment you become the rich one, is not a finish line. It is a new kind of pressure that has its own hidden cost. The question worth sitting with is this: if the people who love you most have quietly decided that your stability is a resource they can draw from, not out of malice, but out of the very real logic of scarcity, what is the plan? Not the financial plan, the human one. Because the spreadsheet is the easy part. It is the dinner table that will test you.